doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound... Oh my god. What is that?
I don't recognise it. Is it not who is meant to be singing it? Is it not singing? I didn't recognise it.
Well, first of all, the guy singing it sounds about 10 years older than Adamant of the early 1980s.
And these were like bad cover versions.
So they couldn't afford to get the original, so they got other people to sing them. That's a good idea. They do that a lot in Asia.
That's a bit deep. That means they didn't really have to pay them.
What's going on? They had scab musicians? That's terrible.
The thing that I think is fascinating is how they got away with using the Top of the Pops logo, which presumably the BBC owned but didn't copyright. But nowhere on this record does it tell you that they're not the original artists.
I can't believe that they got away with not putting the artist titles and actually blagging people that they were going to get the real song then.
Top of the Pops records ran for 17 years from 1968, and in 1971 even managed to top the album charts. They were a sly marketing ploy dreamed up by Pickwick Records, who brought out several imitation compilations a year.
So the charts would come out on a Tuesday lunchtime. You'd listen to Johnny Walker on Radio 1 doing the chart rundown, and by Tuesday afternoon they've worked out which tracks they're going to record, and on Wednesday, in they go. You get a bunch of session musicians and they just play through the entire top 20 on Wednesday afternoon.
By the end of the day, this album would be recorded in one day and would be at the factory, and on the weekend would be in the shops for sale.
It was the equivalent of people when a very posh frock comes out for sort of 400 quid. And like immediately, like sweatshops in Taiwan are just going and making a knockoff copy they can chuck in, and that's what these were.
They're not the original singers for that. So how do they do that? Is that not illegal? These were being sold to children. Who do they think were buying them? And you could buy the calendar on the back. Amazing, really.
Ronco presents Rock and Roller Disco.
Soon there were compilations with recordings by original artists, but from companies like K-Tel and Ronco, who made their name selling cheap household gadgets.
Only $4.99.
They would sell things that would get lint off your sleeves. They would have the buttoneer.
Now get the automatic buttoneer. Buttoneer attaches thick buttons, thin buttons, even shank buttons, and they'll never fall off.
And they also did, if I remember right, record cleaners.
Introducing the amazing record vacuum by Ronco, the stereo accessory that protects all your records. Simply insert your record into a record vacuum and it rotates automatically, sweeping and vacuuming your records instantly.
So when they applied their same marketing prowess to records, Ronco Presents, they advertised them in exactly the same way.
Disco Inferno!
But they were the first to actually run the titles of the track, so you'd see this list of these fabulous artists rolling before you.
Non-stop disco, giving you more of what you're funking for. Disco Inferno, out now from K-Tel.
With K-Tel, any time that they would get a hit record from a record company, the record company would insist on putting, four other tracks from bands that nobody had heard of, just so they could try to recoup their royalties. So the qualities of the albums were never that great.
The key was that they had the television marketing, and both of these records make a big point that they are as seen on TV.
There was a man who was going to save us from all these horrible compilation records. Enter Richard Branson. He set up a student magazine, a series of record shops, and a record label, with a difference. No one wore suits.
Wow, think I love you.
And Richard auditioned hairy new acts in his office.
How many else are there of you in the group?
Well, basically there's 5. In the bizarre world of pop, Branson perceives money, where others see only madness.
Yeah, so Virgin started off as a hippie company.
They worked out of strange offices off Portobello Road.
A bunch of people who actually loved music.
If you saw any of the staff, lovely lads that they were. They had more hair than I've ever had in my life on my head.
It was very kind of almost like a family, or just very friendly people.
It was a bit of a ramshackle place as well. All the deliveries of records would come in and they'd sit in reception and you'd have to sort of step over them.
And on Friday nights, everyone used to go to the pub and Richard Branson would be there, and everyone would just have a party. Richard never had any money, actually. He never had any cash. He's a bit like the Queen in that respect.
We signed the kinds of bands we liked, and the kinds of bands that everybody else rejected. They started off with Mike Oldfield in '73 and signed a lot of hippie acts like Gong and Tangerine Dream and things like that.
And so, this company that became Now Music, Virgin, started so left field, it is unbelievable.
And then I think the thing that really turned the company around was signing the Sex Pistols.
And I think the Sex Pistols put Virgin on the map.
But after the Sex Pistols, the real commercial breakthrough for Virgin was the signing of the former drummer of a prog rock band, Phil Collins. Who in 1981 had a massive #1 album, Face Value, and followed it in 1983 with a huge #1 single. You Can't Hurry Love ushered in a whole raft of hits for Virgin in 1983. Human League followed up Don't You Want Me Baby with 2 number 2s. New signings Culture Club went straight to the top of the charts with Karma Chameleon. And UB40 also made it to #1 with the classic Red Red Wine.
And Virgin was heading to become the most successful independent record label in the world, and it wasn't something that we ever dreamt or thought would be possible.
With all that success, people came knocking on Virgin's door, namely those masters of cheap compilations, K-Tel.
As we had our hit records, K-Tel would ring us up and say, we would like to put your hit records out on an album, and I got fed up with that.
And I just said to him, can't we do this?
So we just thought we'd like to, take it from them and do it ourselves, and do it with a bit of style and class and panache.
For me, it made absolute perfect sense that they would try and reinvent the compilation album. And that's certainly something that Richard Branson has done throughout his career. He took something that was already in the marketplace, but used his knowledge to just twist it a little bit and make it better.
Fired up by this idea, Branson joined forces with label giant EMI. But one question remained: what to call this new compilation? Well, the answer to that question lies in the intricacies of Richard Branson's love life. And it all started at his country recording studio, The Manor, where he seems to have spent a lot of time half naked.
How much leader do we put on? I don't know. Not put the leader. I mean, how much of this stuff do we put on? I'd walked into a recording studio. We have a recording studio called The Manor, which was the first sort of country recording studio. And I saw this lady in the kitchen, who was the most beautiful person I'd seen in my life, and I started chasing her. And I found out that she was an assistant shopkeeper in a bric-a-brac shop called Dodo's. Every day I would sneak off work, and her very wily boss would only let me in if I bought something.
And he bought, for Simon Draper, boss of Virgin Records at the time, a poster which was a Danish bacon advert from the 1930s of a pig looking over the wall at a chicken. And it was saying, now that's what I call music.
That poster was on Simon's office wall, and it was always just quite a funny little thing.
So we was having one of the meetings deciding where we could go with this project, and one of the things that came out, of course, was, what do we call it? Now that's what I call music. That'll do, won't it?
And even more importantly, I managed to win Joan, the shop assistant, and she's now the mother of my children, so a lot of good things came that year.
With Now's title in place, it was time for the great leap forward for compilation records. And in November '83, Virgin and EMI unveiled their plans, appointing former Ronco employee Ashley Abrams to compile the album, and taking a leaf out of K-Tel's TV marketing strategy, splashed what was then a whopping £500,000 on an ad campaign that launched the very first Now. Tell me now! That's what I call music. Well, that's the name of the album, right? And listen, it's 30 of the year's Fabulous hits. There you go, darling, eyes and teeth, head on shoulder. Z-Face your what? Now that's what I call music. Coming up in part 2, we'll be finding out more about the launch of the very first Now.
Do you know, I can't remember the C of the album, but it looks great.
And in the meantime, a question for your Now fact file. Which artist has a record 28-year span between his first and last appearances on Now? Welcome back to the story of Now. Before the break, we asked you which artist had a record 28-year span between his first and last appearances on Now. The answer is Brian May, who appeared with Queen in 1984 and Dappy in 2012. Back to the story. In 1983, Virgin and EMI came up with the idea of a new quality compilation of hits by original artists. Now that's what I call music, which started selling like hotcakes and gave many junior listeners their first fix of pop. And just a glimpse of that first precious Now still inspires awe and wonder in young people today.
Is this the first ever
ever album that came out.
Is this number one? First one?
I suppose this is the first one, is it? Is this where it all started?
Do you know, I can't remember the sleeve of the album, but it looks great. This that I'm holding in my hand is vinyl. It's something that the younger generation might not be familiar with.
So why doesn't it say one? It should have a one.
They just thought that was it, it's a one-off.
At the time, that was everyone who was wicked at the time.
But already I'm excited by that. There's New Romantics, because I was a goth at this stage. Confused goth. Too fat to be a New Romantic, so a goth. The first thing I think about when I look at this album is what a good time for Hairspray.
The only person that hasn't changed is Rod. Rod Stewart's still the same.
That's the same haircut he's been sporting since 1971. It just so happened that at this very brief period, he fell into fashion. Duran Duran, fantastic. This is the closest Nick Rhodes ever came to actually being a woman. But you can tell this was the first one Duran Duran to have a nervous breakdown because his hair didn't stick up as much as the others.
Put all those haircuts together, and what do you get? A vintage slice of 1983, immortalised on vinyl.
Phil Collins, You Can't Have Enough. Wow.
Duran Duran, please tell me now, is it something I should know? Great song.
Well, that was the Red Red Wine. It was fantastic. Malcolm McLaren, Double Dutch, love that track. Men Without Hats is still the only song that I will ever dance to, because I'm a goth, so I don't dance about my religion.
Everybody lift your hands.
God, there it is. Hey you, Rock City Crew. They were the ones that started it all that rapping business. Heaven 17 Temptation, fantastic.
Try to understand that sudden feeling carved by another's hand.
The first Now that Heaven 17 wrote was the very first Now.
Can't keep on living like this.
It was slightly strange for us because we were a little bit left field. So when Temptation was on, the very first Now felt to us a bit like acceptance. I guess you felt like you were part of the pop industry. I'm still not sure that's a good thing, to be honest. But we were accepted.
I would like to call two of my producers, Heaven 17. And the first Now provided a further showcase for Heaven 17's talents.
We're on it twice, because we produced the Tina Turner hit, Let's Stay Together. Tina flew over from LA, and she asked Martin and I if we'd go and sing live with her on The Tube, which was the TV programme, The Tube. And we said, yeah, we'd love to. And then got really nervous, and I said, no, I don't want to do it, Because there she was.
Since we've been together, loving you forever is all I need.
And it was without a shadow of a doubt the most nervous I've ever been singing. It was terrifying, but good fun. It's a long time ago, but I'm proud to be on, the first one of these. Now helped everyone that was on it because it cross-fertilised everybody's music. You would buy that album because it got Phil Collins on it. It also had a load of other artists on it. It's not like these days when you just pick one track and play it. You put the album on and you listen to it. So you were getting to an enormous audience.
And there's another artist who made more than one appearance on the first Now, Limahl. And there's a story behind it.
Now this is interesting because you've got Kajagoogoo here, but you've got Limahl up here. So this must have been the moment that Kajagoogoo split.
I thought Kajagoogoo, and then it can't be Kajagoogoo because Limahl's over there. But Limahl left Kajagoogoo. Kajagoogoo carry on after Limahl.
Well, side 1, track 4, Limahl, Only for Love. Side 2, Kajagoogoo, Too Shy. What does that mean? Anything? I don't know.
Here you've got Limahl, and he looks like a dead badger. And this is the rest of a rather annoyed Kajagoogoo because Limahl's left.
Kajagoogoo were riding the crest of a wave, top 5 in America, really number 1 all over the world, and they phoned me and said, we're going to do the second album without you. Goodbye.
And Kajagoogoo was still desperately going on being led by, I believe he was called Nick Beggs, a vegetarian.
I know way too much about Kajagoogoo.
There is a third Kajagoogoo song on here, which is the song they released after they fired me in that famous phone call. But it is a good song, and I think it got to number 8 in the charts, called Big Apple.
So you've got sort of the whole Kajagoogoo, futility, excitement, and utter desperation of pop music in one album.
Now 1 and its follow-up, Now 2, were runaway successes, selling lorry loads and landing high in the album charts. And it wasn't long before other people cottoned onto the formula and Now had a serious rival. The Hits, set up by a competing group of record companies.
CBS, WEA and BMG got together and formed The Hits, which was the album that kept Now 4 off the number 1 that Christmas, because they had, to be honest, they had more hits. Virgin had a really great 1983 and a really bad 1984.
Am I right in saying that the first one that I remember, now this, obviously I'm the eldest in the group, but I remember there was a rival called The Hits, and it had like the dice on the front.
I remember it being around at the time, but it was at a time where you chose sides, especially in my life. You know, you're either a Coca-Cola drinker or a Pepsi drinker. You're a VHS man or a Betamax man.
It's not supporting your football team. You support Now. You remember it as a kid. It's what you grew up with. It's got a place in your heart.
Hits 5. So if they'd call that Hits 5, I'd have bought that.
Now rallied and came back with Now 5 and 6, with a strong lineup of artists. But there was one artist in her heyday who took issue with Now. And is a long-term absentee from the compilation. Madonna's never been on Now. That really annoys me. I love Madonna.
I think it's a bit snobbish that people like Madonna have said they don't want to appear on Now. I mean, they don't want to put their career, but come on, that was a bit of fun.
A bit of fun, maybe. But in 1986, when Madonna released her classic album True Blue, in spite of rave reviews and huge sales, it was kept off the top slot for months, by Now 7, and in its wake, Now 8. Herself was not amused.
The head of Warner had to ring Madonna in America and say, your album did not reach number 1 because a compilation held it off.
I know this is my favourite now, but True Blue is a classic.
It's a bit of a mutiny. It's like the way everybody hates Manchester United. That's kind of what it's like. These are like all the other teams in the Premier League.
True Blue and Madonna were not for turning. Her record label lobbied for the music industry to set up a new album chart just for compilations.
Warner's led the charge of getting compilations put into a separate chart because it was seen as a triumph of marketing over artistry.
So compilations were pushed out of the album chart to their own compilation charts, so that things like Madonna could be number 1 and Now would be kept off number 1.
The power of Madonna. We've been knocked off number 1 by Now, and you just shrug your shoulders and you go, of course, it's Now.
Coming up in part 3, we'll be finding out how pop stars battled it out for the best track position on Now.
This too? What happened here? You start to worry about your career then go, we got bumped with this too.
And how Now ignited a particular passion in Dom Jolly.
I'm just going to come out and say it, I really loved Bronski Beat.
And another question for you, which girl group has made the most consecutive appearances on Now? Elegance.
Because I have Summer's on its mob star past and now is unleashed on the ladies. Arj and the boys and Bel Air booked up beach bonds and we get to the bottom of all the Towie rumours. So pack your stuff cause you are invited.
Really thinks that was going to happen as well as I don't know what. Please watch it happen.
If you want the truth about Towie, it all happens only on ITV2. The new series begins with the Only Ways Mob, Sunday at 10.
Elegance. Wristwear by Seconda. Sponsors music specials. Welcome back. This is the story of Now. And before the break, we asked you who's made the most consecutive appearances on Now. And the answer is Girls Aloud, with 13 consecutive appearances. Now came through the 1980s as a winner, even if it had been put on the naughty step by Madonna. But as it turned towards the end of the decade, Now had a problem. Its branding. The look of Now had changed with almost every cover. And for a while, Richard Branson's pig became the face of Now.
This is it. The pig one. Now that's what I call music. 3.
I mean, personally, I haven't got a clue what that animal is about. He's a rocking pig.
A pig, which features on here and featured in the advert and had a northern accent, polarised people.
Listen! It's now 4 with Culture Club and Eurythmics.
Some people really hated it. Hated the voice, hated the... So that's why the pig only lasted for 2 albums and was got rid of.
And those old covers were a labour of love. Gary DeVeek has been working on them since 1988 and remembers a time before CGI when album covers like Now 12 used real locations.
I think we used some record executives from Liverpool. With the number 12, it was made out of hard vinyl and we had to get it weighted down and literally had to get it stuck on the bottom of the pool. I mean, these numbers, we're talking about like 10-foot numbers, you know.
By Now 16, the pictorial covers went up in smoke, quite literally.
We thought, right, we'll make a model out of fireworks. My boss, he invited all the people from the record company as well to see it. When they actually, you know, ignited the whole thing, it all just became one big flash and bang, and that was it.
The cover art and logo of the old-style pictorial sleeves was about to change. In 1992, there was a radical revamp, with new computer-generated 3D logos for the new CD age. And to this day, the revamped look of the cover still divides fans of Now.
This is the image that I remember, that, and even the adverts, it used to like sort of come at you through the TV.
As far as I'm concerned, that's selling out. I'm all about, give me that, give me the 2D. That's where it's at, people.
I think that's very, very important to the brand. I think the minute they change that, I don't think it'd be a good thing.
For me, it's the beauty of the Now. No, it's not a bag. That's your album. And no, it's not a pocket square or a lapel with a pen in it, with a little badge and a motif. It's actually an album you're buying. This, where's the imagination behind that?
But those covers of Now have a deeper resonance. They belong to the very first Now that we owned, the most precious Now in our collections.
Now this was my first ever Now 32.
My first ever Now that I would have bought.
This is the very first Now, number 3, Now 7.
Now 20.
Now 21, my first, now that's what I call music. Now 10, there's beauty here.
My sister Jess used to get Nows every birthday, every Christmas, and I used to have to steal them because I was the one allowed to listen.
It was mine. It wasn't my mum's, it wasn't my dad's, it was my own record.
When you'd see the Now in the shop the first time, you run over and you'd look at the back and you go, love that one, love that one, love that one.
It's not that magic on Milk Tray. You can open it and go, I fancy a bit of that now.
I used to sit in the back of the car with my CD Walkmans of earphones, listening to it going along to school. But when I look at that, almost, you know, you just feel like you've been taken back in time.
I remember listening to these on the way to school, because my mum said we could have these in the car because there was something on there that me and my sisters and she would like, you know, a family album.
This got us through those car sick journeys. The feeling of being a little bit ill in the back of a car was made all the better by stuff like Level 42. My mum would listen to Daniel O'Donnell. And I'd be sick to the teeth of hearing Daniel O'Donnell every single album, one after the other. So I would always fight to get the Now put on.
On this Now 20 is actually Sailing on the Seven Seas by OMD. Andy McCluskey of OMD was the one who was auditioning all the girls for Atomic Kitten. I started singing it to him. He was like, can't believe you know that. So obviously then I stuck in his head. So thank you now for possibly getting me an Atomic Kitten.
I'm just going to come out and say it. I really loved Bronski Beat, Small Town Boy. Which, if anyone knows about that, is about a very ugly potato head gay man from Glasgow who leaves Glasgow because he's getting bullied, and he comes down to London and he meets 2 larger gay men, and then he goes to a local swimming pool and they all watch very fit young men, not gay I believe, wearing tight speedos, diving, and Jimmy Somerville looks sort of, oh. But obviously I was at a boarding school and that wasn't the greatest song to be really espousing, so I bought this to hide my love for Bronski Beat.
We've all got our favourite songs on our favourite Nows. But behind the scenes there was some considerable jostling for getting your song in the best position on Now. From the early days, there was always a tussle for pole position on the album.
I think within a year or 2, people were just fighting to have a track on Now.
There was always competition for where you were placed on the record. You wanted really, if you could be, to be first or second on the first disc.
Queen, whenever they were on the albums, always wanted to be track 1 sidebar. So with this album, 2, we had Queen and Paul McCartney who wanted to be tracked one side one.
All we hear is Radio Gaga, Radio Goo, Radio Gaga.
And how did they resolve that problem? Someone had to tell Paul McCartney that the last track on the album was just as prestigious.
Play the Lights of Peace.
So I can imagine that EMI sold it to Paul, that it was the sort of song that would be a fantastic end of an album.
We try to be consistently obstructive about those requests, because once you start trying to accommodate 40 artists in position one, the whole thing would fall apart.
But after pole position has been decided, there's another delicate issue. Who goes on disc 1? Who goes on disc 2?
The first time I was on an hour, I was actually on disc 1. I was pretty excited.
When we released Whole Again, that was track 1, side 1, and that's just like...
Then the second time I was on disc 2, and it was actually pretty much the last song on disc 2, which isn't so bad.
So here we are on now 84, and we're number 13. On disc 1! On disc 1!
You want to be on disc 1. Disc 1 is basically saying these are the big ones. These are the ones that you all like and know.
I'm just so pleased we made it to disc 1. I know. That's an achievement.
You'd only listen to the first, half of the tracks, because they put all the big ones at the start, and you just throw the rubbish ones at the end.
Disc 2, I think it's a frisbee.
Disc 2? What happened here? You start to worry about your career then go, we got bumped for disc 2.
Apparently I appeared on Now 20 in the second disc. I close my eyes.
Deeper on disc 2, after Jason, you usually hit the Twilight Zone, where eternally dwell the songs most likely to test the memory of the most avid Now fan.
I bet you there's always one that you come to that you go, what the heck is that?
Propaganda, Dr. Matt Mabuse, I don't remember that one.
I don't even know the song by Simply Red, The Lady Godiva's Room.
Kingmaker, 10 Years Asleep. I've never heard that song in my life.
Brilliant Mind by Furniture. Never heard it.
You must be out of your brilliant mind.
This is one of the things with compilation albums. It's got loads of hits on it, and somewhere in there will be a song that you have no recollection of.
They're pretty much always tracks that did actually make the top 30, but they might have been fueled by people with big fan bases. So the obvious one on Now 3 is David Sylvian.
David Sylvian. Ah, vaguely remember him. Wasn't he the lead singer of a band called Japan?
This is him not even in Japan, his band. So that's so art school, it's so arch that it just shouldn't be on here.
If the overall project had not been that successful, and you were trying to recoup some money to offset the losses made on an expensive video or a recording budget, then this would be a way to get some of the money back.
A deal done at a nightclub, a few drinks, a bit of this and that. Yeah, we'll put so-and-so's track on the album. Oh, thanks for that. Cynical? Moi?
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm innocent. I've said to Now in the past, to get that track you've got to put these 2 tracks on. So we're all guilty of it.
Coming up in part 4, we get all cosy with Dermot's Now Roulette obsession. And if you've got any old Now CDs, you might want to dig them out. They might be worth a bit.
And it's worth, if you have it, about £500 sterling.
In the meantime, can you guess who's made the most ever appearances on Now?
George Michael?
Phil Collins, I think Queen.
Elton John.
Welcome back to the story of Now. Before the break, we asked you who's made the most ever appearances on Now. The answer is Robbie Williams with 28 appearances as a solo artist.
I don't wanna rock, DJ, but you're making me feel so nice.
Now That's What I Call Music has been with us for 30 years and provided a soundtrack to our lives. But interestingly, statistics show that as consumers, our feelings for Now change through the years. It's an on-off relationship, and we can blow hot and cold with the old dame of compilations.
And when I was a kid, it was the coolest thing on the block to have a Now.
You got your first Now album perhaps when you were 11 or something like that. But all of a sudden, when you reached 16, they were, oh, no.
As I got to about 18, 19, I remember people flicking through my record collection and panicking because they were going to find a Now, which meant that you were a musical idiot and you didn't choose your own music.
Then you stopped buying music after you got married and had kids. And then one day you had your first party again and you suddenly thought, oh, I've got no current music, what do I do?
Me and my wife and kids, we always have a New Year's bash. Just before the party, I'm panicking about what music to play. I quickly download a Now album, because it's a safe album.
And one man of a certain age who's definitely come back to Now in later years is the nation's favourite Dermot O'Leary. Every Saturday on his radio show, Dermot has a midlife moment as he takes a trip into Now's back catalogue, discovering some favourite tunes, but also the rich variety of music on each album. Aided by his homemade Now roulette wheel, he gambles with his audience and leaves it to chance to select a sparkling or not so sparkling slice of Now.
Alright, so last week our roulette wheel picked Street Tough for the Rebel MC from the classic Now 16. This week it's Now 17 and we are entering for the first time the 1990s. Released in April, CD1 perfectly reflects the prevalent indie Manchester scene with tracks from the Happy Mondays, Primal Scream and Spiral Carpets and Jesus Jones. And CD2 embraced the rave culture sweeping Britain with the Easy Posse, Business, D-Mob and the brilliant Orbital. And nestled in there too, some classic Cliff Richard, Phil Collins and UB40 giving you possibly the most schizophrenic album ever released. And so, what track does the Now roulette wheel have in store for us? Where it stops, nobody knows. We are going with side 3, track 3, which is... it's not a classic. 49ers, Don't You Love Me.
But the track Dermot can't remember by the 49ers, Don't You Love Me, is representative of what happened to Now through the 90s, as it moved beyond pop music to take on board many different styles of music, including the blossoming indie scene.
This is now, that's what I call music 26. And interestingly, just down here is a little indie suburb, and it's quite nice. You've got REM, Sidewinder That Sleeps Tonight, but then you go into the Levelers. I mean, full-on, crusty, dogs on string, let's take away everyone's possessions.
The idea was first put to us, it didn't really mean much to us in the band.
I never thought I'd see a day when you became what you become. It's easy now to just look away, baby conscience on the run.
And amazingly enough, it did reach people we would never normally have reached, and our record sales went up just because of this. We had more people coming to see us, and so every time they asked us to do it after that, we jumped at it.
And jump at it they did. The Levellers made a further appearance on Now 33, alongside Queen and the Lighthouse Family.
You know, we hate using the word message, but for us to get that to as many people as possible is always the greatest thing.
Via the millennium, and Now typically contained pop, sat cheek by jowl with dancehall crossover, indie trip-hop, French house, and a style of music, novelty, that needs no introduction.
Hi, this is my friend Daphne, and I'm Celeste.
People forget novelty hits. No one seeks them out on iTunes to buy them, so the only place that novelty hits really crop up is when you play an old Now album.
This one is never going to go out of date, because track 12 on CD2 is me! The video was good fun. We made it on a special beach in a warehouse in North London, and the two itsy bitsy girls, Dawn and Annie. Gary Barlow rather liked the look of Dawn and got her to dance for Take That, and she's now Mrs. Barlow. So there you go. You start off as an itsy bitsy girl, and now you're Mrs. Barlow!
A few years later in the noughties, Now underwent a transformation, as it shifted format again. It had gone from vinyl
I used to smell it. I used to look at the pictures for hours.
to cassette.
Remember like when the tape used to go a bit funny and you used to have to like twist it around? Yes, with your finger or with a biro or something. And then when it's finished, it would click out and you could turn it around. Oh my god!
To CD,
I remember when CDs first came in, and I was like, you could just skip? Wow.
to minidisc.
I mean, I would have put that on my computer, I think, and it would have bunged it up.
And by the time Rihanna starred on Now 67 in 2007, it went to download.
You know, I've gone from cassette, CD to iPod. Whatever's next, I don't know. Next will probably be memorising it in the brain.
Whatever the format, if you've got any Nows knocking around at home, you may want to check how much they're worth.
The Now vinyls went up from Now 1 to Now 35, and this is Now 35. And if you have Now 35,